welcome back to CompTIA Security. This is the textbook that we're using for our information assurance class. Today we're going to be talking about Module 9 or Chapter 9, Infrastructure Security. The goal for this module, you should be able to list the different types of security applications and how they can be used, describe security software protections, explain how a security design can aid in mitigating attacks, that means to help prevent them, and describe different access technologies and how they can be used. So there are different appliances or security appliances that we can use. The first is what's called a gap analysis. So you're comparing the organization's current state of information security with the recommended controls to try to find anything that's missing or the gap. Segmentation, isolation, least privilege, configuration enforcement, making sure all the security measures are applied to reduce unnecessary vulnerabilities. Again, from before, remember the Equifax breach back in 2017 was a result that they didn't put all the proper software patches in. Decommissioning, removing or dismantling a technology or service from a live production. You can't just simply unplug something like that. It has to be, there's proper procedures for taking it offline and decommissioning it. An example is in that Google a video that shows the Google data center. They talk about how the hard drives, when the hard drives need to be decommissioned, there's a person actually that goes through and removes the hard drives, and then they show a proper procedure for destroying the old hard drive. Removing of unnecessary software, deleting software that is not essential to an operating system in order to eliminate the attack vector. You don't want to have unnecessary programs, even like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, or whatever. If it's on a server if someone's not going to be using it as a PC, you don't need to have that kind of software on there. And selection of effective controls. And then device placement, physically locating important devices in secure locations. That's important because you don't want to have your main server out in the middle of the open where the main room is. First of all, as people walk around, the dust will get into the fans and mess up the cooling of the computer, plus also any vibrations, noise, and things like that would definitely. So it should be in an isolated, like an equipment room or quote data center. So let's talk about common network devices. The first is a network switch. That's a device that connects network devices. So when you plug in several computers, or if you plug in other devices like printers, like network printers or whatever, you'll notice even like on the back of, if you have those ones in your home, the back of the Linksys or the Netcom or Netlink, that there's like a 4-port switch. A switch is a device that connects network devices. So it can learn which device is connected by examining the MAC address, the media access control. So the proper handling of a switch includes implementing port security and configuring other switch defenses. A good one where you have a smart switch will actually say, oh, somebody plugged in another unauthorized device in a port that was already assigned to, computer 123. And that smart switch will then disable that port so that it can protect it. And that's part of what was a subset of was port security. Switches that support port security can be configured to limit the number of MAC addresses that can be learned on ports. So again, you're narrowing it down. Or you can say, well, you can set that to say 1. So this is the only authorized equipment that's on that port. So if it's not the proper equipment, the switch will basically shut down that port or not allow it to be used. So types of attacks on these network devices, you have what are called MAC flooding, MAC address spoofing, ARP poisoning, and port mirroring. So with MAC flooding, an attacker overflows the switch's address table with fake MAC addresses, forcing it to act like a hub, sending a packets to all the devices. Okay, and that was one of the things when you learned in your networking, the first device that connected different devices together was a hub. It had some weaknesses, and so that's when technology came about and invented the switch. Your MAC address spoofing. If two devices have the same MAC address, a switch may send frames to each address. An attacker can then change that MAC address to their device to match the target's device MAC address. And so you basically, like if you are in a room and someone says, I have a message for Bob, and there's two Bobs in the room, or Jack, or Fred, or Susan, or Jane. So which one do you get it? Because one of them is actually forging or spoofing the other address. ARP poisoning, they're sending a forged ARP packet to the source device, substituting the attacker's computer MAC address. And port mirroring, the attacker connects their device to the switch's port. These are the different common network device attacks. So this is where you get into this, as you build more complicated networks, you get into a new device called a router. Now, the switch was a level 2 device. A router is a level 3 device because it has the routing capabilities. Okay, it can forward frames across different computer networks. So right now, up to this point, the switch only sent things across the local area network within that block of IP addresses. Routers can perform security functions by using what's called that access control list that we talked about last time. It's a set of permissions to rules that functions as a network filter to permit or restrict data flowing into and out of that router network interfaces. So the routers can protect against devices that imitate another computer's IP address, and this defense is called anti-spoofing. Now, on the network, you're going to have another computer that's going to be sitting by itself giving out information. That's a server. It distributes resources and services to devices connected to the network. That'd be like a web server, your DNS server, database server, whatever the case may be. So the basic steps for hardening a server, again, include applying the patches to vulnerabilities, whether it's a software patch, whether it's an operating system patch, whatever it might be. Monitor the server too. Make sure, don't just leave it there and then don't come back to it. You always want to check it. Maybe there's usually set up something where if there's an issue coming up, it'll show up like in the event log or maybe even a prompt on the screen. You want to control access permissions. You don't want just anybody to come in where the server is. It should only be the authorized personnel, and not just any IT person, but somebody who's in charge of maintaining the servers. Remove unnecessary software and secure the server's location. Again, when you look at the Google Data Center video, you'll see examples of where they've got those all isolated. Another protection is what's called load balancing, where you can help evenly distribute work across a network. This class is not the networking class, but if you've ever gone and looked at IP addresses of pages like Yahoo or other companies, they do load balancing because those search engines get hit so much, people going to them, that then to just like driving in a car for all day long, the car's gonna need some time to recoup, the engine to cool down and change the gasoline, put more gasoline in, put more oil in, and things like that. Well, you can't necessarily do that in a service where they expect it to be up and running all the time. So what they do is they have um, another set of computers and servers so that as it comes in, just like when you go into the airport, you have gate 1, gate 2, gate 3, the load balancing after for Yahoo will change the IP address. When you go to www.yahoo.com, it'll change that IP address about every 15 minutes, so that gives that time for that first block to get caught up, and so it doesn't overwhelm it. Okay, and it has security advantages. Can detect and stop attacks that are directed at server or an application. They can also be used to detect and prevent protocol attacks. Some can HTTP error pages or remove server identification headers, okay, from the HTTP responses to help protect the server. So you have your additional infrastructure hardware. First is the firewall that uses a bidirectional inspection to examine outgoing and incoming packets. The actions are based on specific criteria rules or rule-based firewalls. Like, I'm only going to allow traffic to come into the web server and not somebody's workstation or some other computer here on the network. I'm going to allow only outgoing packets to go to the internet and not or to that web server, and not allow somebody to go to another computer. So that's a policy-based firewall that allows more generic statements instead of specific rules. And the firewalls can only apply to content or URL filtering. Once it passes that rule, or that whatever that rule is, then or whether the policy or the rule, then it's basically the package is on its way to being delivered. So in your access control list, you have the ability to allow, bypass, deny, force allow, or log only. So you can see the differences. Allow, it explicitly allows traffic that matches the rule to pass. Think of it like, the turnpike toll gates. Once you go through, you're on your way. Bypass allows the traffic to bypass a firewall. Generally, that's not a good idea and is not used. It may be based on an IP port or traffic direction or protocol, but that's generally, you would probably further refine that. It'd have to be certain extensions. Say, like, an example of that would be like the police cars, the turnpike, the traffic, ambulance, fire. Those are specialized cars. They probably would be able to bypass through that gate or that firewall. Deny, again, just like you don't have the permission to go through, so we're going to deny that traffic from going through that router, or maybe based on an IP address or port or whatever. Force allow, forcibly allowing the traffic that would normally be denied by other rules. Or log only, simply we're just going to log everybody that's going through. Kind of like when you go through and the toll gate takes a picture of your license plate. Those type of things. So here's an example in a firewall, or from a firewall program. This is your content URL filter. Okay, so you can see I have what they're doing is they're accessing or building this policy based off of web pages or URLs. It says, okay, is this an adult or sexual? Is this controversial? Is this communication or media? Shopping, entertainment? And you can check all those things that are allowed. And you can select the range. So if somebody they'd have to pre-screen and say, okay, somebody that's age 8 to 12, we're going to, block them from dating and personnel, child abuse images, nudity, pornography, sex education, and you can see all the rest of them down here. So everything that's checked, those are the filters that are going to go through. Okay? So the following are different categories of firewalls. You have hardware firewalls, those are actual physical devices, versus software, which are software programs like Bitdefender, Komodo, Dragon, Komodo Firewall, and some of the others. Even Microsoft has a firewall program in its operating system. Okay, so all those things are important. Host versus appliance. So you can have firewalls on a computer or a host versus appliance versus virtual. You got a virtual firewall if you're running a virtual program or virtual desktop. You have categories: who wrote the firewall program? Is it open source? Is it proprietary? Is it stateful? Is it stateless? Is it a dedicated firewall versus network access control list? And we'll talk about some of these. You'll learn about them later on. So here's an example of an appliance firewall. So you can see here in the top row, that orange brick wall, that's your firewall. You have your internet, you have your router. Notice that it's a separate device. Why? Most routers don't allow or just limited in what they'll allow you to, put on as far as a firewall. So you want an actual firewall device, which is, again, a standalone program or standalone device that you can program through its menu. And you can do more sophisticated configurations. Okay, several specialized firewall appliances, including web application firewall, next generation firewalls, unified threat management, a layer 7 firewall, and network address translation gateways. Okay, so you also have proxy servers. There's the devices that act as substitutes on behalf of the primary device. So I don't know if you remember American Online, and some of the others, they still use them. And basically, when you would get on to dial in on the American Online, you never actually went out to the internet. You just simply went right up to the proxy server, like someone says, okay, I'm going to come over your table and take your order. And then it goes, the proxy goes and actually retrieves the information from the website and brings it back to the computer, the primary device. So you have two types. You have a forward proxy. It's a computer or an application that intercepts user requests from the internal secure network and processes them on behalf of the user. So it actually renders the results that it's found on the internet, that all of the user sees is whatever the proxy gets you. A reverse proxy router requests incoming information from an external network to the correct internal server. So let's say if I want to go to www.abc.com and they're behind a firewall or use a proxy, you're expecting with the www.abc.com and the HTTP protocol or HTTPS protocol that you're going to a web page of some kind. Well, this reverse proxy makes sure that the incoming information, or the incoming request rather, goes to the web server on that local network and not some other workstation. So here's an example of forward and reverse proxy servers. Let's take a look at it. You see the first computer on the left has a 192.146.118 IP block. And once it gets out on the internet, there's a reverse proxy. And that's on the 123.org side. And on the 123.org side, That's where you have Web Server 1, Web Server 2, Web Server 3 that then eventually want to send information back to the first computer where the user is on the left. Okay, so deception can also be used as a security defense by directing threat actors away from valuable assets to something that has little or no value. And basically, the term is used where lures can serve, the technology lure can serve as a bait to threat actors. And this is called a honeypot, just like bees that go into honey. It's a computer located in an area with limited security that serves as actual bait for threat actors. Now again, two goals of using the honeypot include deflecting and then discovering what exactly is it that they're doing. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to look for? So deflect and discover. A low interaction honeypot may contain a login prompt. They're trying to hack into something where a login is, or a high interaction honeypot. We're capturing more information from the threat actor. Now, if you have several honeypots in there, like one for each for different types of things, then that becomes a honey net, which is a network of honeypots that are set up with intentional vulnerabilities. You also have what's called a sinkhole, which is a bottomless pit designed to steer unwanted traffic away from the intended destination to another device. The goal is to deceive the threat actor into thinking that the attack was successful. Why? Well, because when they send something out, usually they'll either get denied or they'll get a response back, but they think that it's successful because they did not get denied. And so they're thinking that it's successful here. Then on your network, you can have what's called an intrusion detection system that can detect an attack as it comes. Almost like a burglar alarm detects when someone's trying to break into your house. Now that's different than this next one, which is an intrusion prevention system. An intrusion prevention system attempts to block the attack that's been detected. So in essence, an intrusion prevention system has as its first measure or first step is an intrusion detection system. Once that intrusion prevention system detects that somebody or there's an attack on its system, it can then go about preventing it. So an inline system is connected directly to the network and monitors the flow of data as it occurs. Okay, you have a passive system that's connected to a short port on the switch, which receives a copy of the network traffic. If the network switch systems are known as network intrusion detection system and a network intrusion prevention system, then it won't know that it's being attacked. Okay, so network-based systems are known as a network intrusion detection system and a network intrusion prevention system. So let's do our knowledge check for our chapter here. Maya is researching information on firewalls. She needs a firewall that allows for more generic statements instead of creating specific rules. What type of firewall should Maya consider purchasing that supports her need? She wants more generic statements instead of creating specific rules. Now remember, we talked about this earlier. So is it a content URL, policy-based, hardware firewall, proprietary? Take a moment and think about it. Maybe someday on a future job, your boss is going to come along and say, we need to put a firewall in there with more generic statements. So what kind of firewall, as IT director, would you be looking to get for the company? Or if you remember from before, we want a policy-based firewall. The policy-based firewall is more flexible than a rule-based firewall. Okay, the type of firewall. This type of firewall allows for more generic statements to be used instead of specific rules. You also can use what's called web filtering. Web filtering monitors the website's users that are browsing so that the organization can either allow or block the web traffic to protect against potential threats and enforce corporate policies. The different types of web filtering software are based on the location of the filtering engine. So you could have browser scanning, agent-based scanning, centralized proxy scanning, and cloud scanning. There are different methods that web filters use to identify malicious websites to create block rules or criteria for which a website is inaccessible to users. You have content categorization, universal resource locator or URL scanning, and reputation score. You also can use what's called DNS filtering. That's where you're blocking harmful or inappropriate content. Web filtering blocks web pages. DNS filtering blocks entire domains. So www.baddomain.com, we're able to block that and anything that comes from that. So we don't block the www part, we just block the baddomain.com. So DNS resolvers can act as filters by refusing to resolve queries for certain domains. And then what happens is that the client is unable to connect to it. And these malicious domains are found in a list of unapproved sites that DNS can access. You have file integrity monitoring. That's a technology designed to keep an eye on files to detect any changes in that file that may indicate a cyber attack. Problem with file integrity monitoring is a high volume of what are called noise or too much unhelpful information. For example, for however many times we're going to sit and you're going to enter data into the server on a file, that may be changing quite a bit. And you may have to set a flag. This is okay. Well, this is commonly used, so we're okay with that. Whereas if it's maybe an archive file or a file that's not used every day, and all of a sudden it gets changed, that may be something that you want to set a flag for. And you can see here the problem with FIM is the high volume of noise. Now they say noise, that's basically all people that are adding or reading or accessing those files. You have extended detection and response. The endpoint detection and response tools monitor endpoint events by aggregating data from multiple endpoint computers to a centralized database. The extended detection and response collects and correlates data across various network appliances, including servers, email systems, cloud responses, as well as endpoints. So let's try our knowledge on this check activity number 2. Which of the following is not a common network device that can be configured to provide a degree of security protection? Not a common network device. Router, switch, endpoint, or server? Well, think of yourself, which of these have we not mentioned or not talked about? Well, we talked about routers, we talked about switches, we kind of sort of talked about endpoints, and we briefly talked about servers. Which one do you think it might be? Well, of all 4 of these, the answer is an endpoint. We did talk about servers, we did talk about endpoints, but the endpoint is not something that you can configure to provide a degree of security protection. It's running programs. Routers, switches, and servers are all common network devices that can be configured to provide security. Your endpoint is also inclusive. It may be including a printer, it may be including a network attached storage, and things like that. Servers can run software, like you can have a software firewall, and things like that. So that's your answer on this one. Which of the following is not a common network device? And that is an endpoint. Okay, now let's talk about a secure infrastructure design. A network infrastructure, remember that's the inside part of the network, should be designed with some areas for general access, while other parts of the network have successfully tighter restrictions. So if you go to www.google.com, you're facing the public outward part of the Google database or servers. You're not looking behind the scenes. For you to actually go to the next level, each of those takes a higher level of restrictions. The most restricted level of all that a network has physical isolation from all other networks is called an air-gapped network. Okay, again, the most restricted level of all can be a network that has physical isolation from all other networks or the internet, called an air-gapped network. The infrastructure separation can be achieved through physical segmentation and logical segmentation. Logical segmentation creates subnets via virtual networks or through network addressing schemes. You also have virtual LANs, VLAN. Remember, LAN stands for local area network. That allows scattered users to be logically grouped together even though they're physically attached to different switches. So say, for instance, we have someone from the chemistry department working with us in the computer science department because they're maybe they're over here in Michelle Hall. Or maybe one of the professors here in Michelle Hall at YSU is working over, say, maybe in Moser. And we want to make sure they have the ability to get their computer science resources even though they're over in Moser. So we would set up a virtual LAN. When devices on the same VLAN are connected to the same switch, the switch can handle the transfer of packets to the members of the VLAN group. When a VLAN members in one switch need to communicate with members connected to another switch, a special tagging protocol must be used. So what they do is to allow the untrusted outside users access to resources such as web servers. Most networks employ what's called a demilitarized zone, or DMZ. And it functions as a separate network that rests outside the secure network perimeter. The untrusted users can then access the DMZ but cannot enter the secure network. So you have a jump server, it's a minimally configured server within the DMZ that runs only essential protocols and ports. It connects to two dissimilar security zones while providing unrestricted access between them. Here's an example of a DMZ with two firewalls. So you can see in the bottom left here is our DMZ, the web server and the email server. So you have the internet at the top, the router, the first firewall, and the first switch that goes down into the DMZ, and the second firewall and the second switch that goes down to the database and application servers. Why would you want to, just as a side note from a security point of view, why would you want to separate the web server and the email server from the database server and the application server? Why do you think that might be necessary? Think about it. Well, the web servers can be serving out information. The email server, both of them are going to have a lot of traffic. But your database and application server need more security. So they're not going to have direct activity. They may have indirect activity from the application server connects to the database server. You want to keep that traffic separate from the email and the regular web server, so that the web server is like a front port that then goes behind the scenes to the database server and the application server. Okay, here's an example of what's called a jump server. You have your DMZ here on the left, in the middle, after the switch and before the web server and the email server. And on the right side you have a database server and the application server, but no jump server. So let's take a look at these concepts. You have an intranet. That's a private network that belongs to an organization that can only be accessed by approved internal users. Maybe you have a network system set up at home, or if you're on campus in your dorm room, that you have your computer, your printer, things like that, and then you connect to an outside network, to the YSU, through the YSU network. And that's where you're going to have an extranet. It's a private network that can also be accessed by authorized external customers, vendors, and partners. And you also might have a guest network, a separate open network that anyone can access without prior authorization. So you have an intranet, you have an extranet, and you have a guest network. So then you also have this other concept called zero trust. So basically it says, I don't trust anybody. I have zero trust. It's a strategic initiative that is designed to prevent successful attacks by threat actors who are already within a network. So somebody within the network, behind the firewalls. So zero trust acknowledges that trusting everyone within a network is a vulnerability. So I don't trust you. So every time you walk around from room to room, you have to use that security badge or whatever authorization that you have with you. So it's not just once you're inside, you can walk freely around. I see that in say for instance, in a hotel that wants to protect its people, its customers. So they give you the room key, and to go up and down in the elevator, you have to use the room key. So beyond level 1, which is your DMZ or your public access, and to get that, you have to have been authorized to have the room key just to walk across in there to get past security. And then you would touch your pass or badge to there's like a panel that would be a panel on the elevator, and then you can press a number above 1 to go up to a higher floor. Once you exit, if you go to any other elevator or go back down, other than room 1, rather than floor 1, you have to use your badge to go to another floor. Say like maybe they have a restaurant on the second floor, and other entertainment, and then everything else is like floors 3 through say 10 or whatever. Now to move around inside there from floor to floor, you have to use that, and that's the case where you have what's called zero trust. Okay, zero trust architecture is a framework for implementing zero trust. It focuses on authentication and authorization to shrink implicit trust while still maintaining availability. And it minimizes threats against assets. That's called threat scope reduction. The policy engine is a component of the policy decision point that provides input into the policy enforcement point to make the decision whether to grant access for that request. The policy engine relies on policy automation that uses automated processes for referring to processes for approval. So the control plane is used for communication, while the data plane is used for the transfer of the resource if approved. We'll see this in the next slide here. So here's your policy engine at the top. There's your control plane below it. If it's approved, it goes down to the policy enforcement point. and then if it's approved there, and it's given access. And you can see here comes the request on the bottom left, and all those steps above have to take place first. So accessing a network infrastructure from a location other than the campus on which the organization is called remote access. We have that at YSU. If you're on campus, you remember how it gives you, if you're on campus, you just enter your username and password. If you're off campus, you have your username and password, and then you have to have that additional authentication. So the remote access always requires the connection to be secure, again for protection, and that's your secure communication. This involves setting the best protocol to use, protocol selection, and opening the right ports on devices so communication can occur. That's your port selection, protocol selection, and port selection. Two of the most common access technologies are virtual private networks and network access control. A virtual private network is securing technology that enables authorized users to use an unsecured public network, the internet, as if it were a secured private network. Say like you have an insurance company like New York Life, and they're up in New York, where we're here in Ohio, and maybe there's a New York agent that needs to get onto the New York Life network up in there. They can use a virtual private network through the public internet and do their work. So there are two types of VPNs. One's called a remote access VPN and a site-to-site VPN. Site-to-site, the most common protocol used for VPNs are IPsec and SSL. Actually, SSL was replaced by Transport Layer Protocol, the TLS rather. The Layer 2 tunneling protocol is a VPN protocol that does not offer any encryption or protection, so it's usually paired with the IPsec, and it's noted as L2TP/IPsec. Make sure if you're setting up a network, virtual private network like that, that you make sure that it's encrypted or protected. Your network access control examines the current state of an endpoint before it can connect to the network. So that's your devices. The devices that do not meet a specific set of criteria are then denied access to that network, or given restricted access to computing resources, or connected to a quote quarantine network. Example would be like at the hotels. When you join their local network, you're given a restricted access to just look at hotels, maybe flights, and it's not in some cases you have to be then authorized to go out to the internet. Some network access controls systems use software agents installed on endpoints to gather information. Maybe sometimes you have to enter your last name and maybe the room number or something like that. Another alternative is when the NAC technology is embedded within a Microsoft Windows Active Directory domain controller. So here's an example of a network access control process. You see here, in the middle we have security self-assessment to system health agent, and then from there it goes to the health registration authority and the antivirus server to check, patch management server to check, and gets basically a health certificate for that computer that says, yeah, they've got all the proper updates, they have the antivirus, and they get a good health certificate. Then that computer is given access it's presented to the network server, and the network server says, sure, okay, you've met their criteria. Now we'll get you into up at the top here, the quarantined network, that you have to have that proper health server, so that health certificate that's generated by that system. And that's your network access control. Okay, so let's talk about, or rather our check activity, our knowledge check activity, number 3 here. Which of the following is not, repeat not, true about zero trust? Remember, zero trust is like someone saying, I don't trust you, I don't trust anybody, I don't trust anything. Okay. Zero trust assumes that networks have already been infiltrated by threat actors. Zero trust is designed to make a system trusted. The motto of zero trust is never trust, always verify. And zero trust acknowledges that implicit trust is a vulnerability. Now we want a statement that's false. We don't want one's true. So it looks like C and D are true, so they aren't what we want. So it's either going to be A or B. Okay. Okay, the answer is B. Zero trust is designed to make a system trusted. No, that's not true about zero trust. Zero trust is not designed to make a system trusted, but rather to eliminate the trust. Okay. Okay, so again, we'll reach the end of the chapter in the module. You want to rate your competence on the following module objectives on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 indicates that you have full confidence in your competence of that objective, and 1 indicates you have very little confidence in your competence of that objective. If you self-score less than 4, you should consider reviewing the module and related exercises. Okay, you want to list the different types of security appliances, how they can be used. Then we talked about hardware and software. Describe security software protections. Explain how a secure design can aid in mitigating attacks. We talked about some of those. And describe different access technologies and how they can be used. Okay, and this is the chapter summary. Remember again, this helps you prepare not only for the midterm or the exams here, but also for if you're going to sit for that CompTIA Security Plus exam. Okay, best regards. We'll see you in the next chapter. Have a nice day.